My new CFO told me I was being terminated because my $195,000 salary could instead fund 5 recent engineering graduates who would bring fresh perspectives and modern approaches to R&D innovation. My name is Grant Miller, 51 years old, Director of Research and Development with 16 years leading product innovation at TechBridge Solutions in Cleveland, Ohio. I had spent nearly 2 decades developing the core technology platform that generated approximately $18 million in annual revenue, roughly 60% of the company's total income, through products built on 3 fundamental patents that I personally held and licensed exclusively to TechBridge under employment terms that apparently no one in current leadership had bothered to review. When Lawrence Hampton called me into his office at 10:23 a.m. on a Thursday morning and explained, "Look, Grant, this isn't personal, but we've been analyzing cost structures across the organization, and your compensation represents significant optimization opportunity. Your salary could fund 5 talented recent graduates who'll bring fresh energy and current technical knowledge to the R&D function. We're making this change effective immediately to capture the cost savings in this quarter's financials." I simply nodded and said, "I understand. I wish you and the team the best of luck moving forward." What Lawrence didn't realize during his efficient cost optimization termination was that my employment contract, negotiated carefully when I joined TechBridge in 2009, included unusual intellectual property provisions that protected my work while allowing the company to commercialize it. I retained personal ownership of all technology I developed, with exclusive licensing rights granted to TechBridge only while I remained employed at director level or above. The 3 core patents covering the technologies that generated $18 million annually were registered in my name, with licensing agreements that automatically terminated when my employment ended. Lawrence's $195,000 cost savings was about to eliminate $18 million in revenue and expose the company to immediate patent infringement liability. And I made the calculated decision to offer no warnings about consequences he should have discovered by reading the employment contract before terminating the person who held the intellectual property. The termination conversation in Lawrence's office lasted exactly 9 minutes and concluded with me turning in my keycard, security badge, and company laptop to his assistant, while Lawrence moved immediately to his next meeting, apparently satisfied that he had achieved decisive cost optimization that would impress the board during quarterly financial reviews. His confidence suggested he had never considered that employment contracts might contain provisions beyond salary and benefits, or that intellectual property ownership could be structured in ways that made employee termination strategically catastrophic rather than operationally straightforward. "Grant, I know this is difficult, but I want to emphasize this is purely financial analysis, not performance-related," Lawrence had explained while reviewing what appeared to be a cost comparison spreadsheet on his laptop. "Your technical contributions have been valuable, but we've reached a point where we need to optimize our cost structure for sustainable growth. 5 recent graduates with current programming skills and modern engineering approaches will provide better return on investment than maintaining a single senior position at this compensation level." I'd maintained professional composure while recognizing that Lawrence's financial analysis had apparently consisted entirely of comparing my salary to the aggregate cost of 5 junior engineers without investigating what my salary actually purchased beyond my daily presence in the R&D department. His reduction of 16 years of technology development and patent creation to senior position compensation suggested he viewed R&D leadership as interchangeable technical labor rather than understanding that specific individuals sometimes hold irreplaceable intellectual property that enables entire business operations. "Lawrence, have you reviewed my employment contract and the intellectual property agreements associated with my position?" I had asked, while already knowing the answer from his confident demeanor and the absence of any legal counsel in the termination meeting. Lawrence had glanced at his laptop with mild confusion. HR processed the standard termination documentation. If there are specific contract provisions you want to discuss, you can raise them with HR during your exit process. But the termination decision is final. We've already begun recruiting the replacement engineering team. The response confirmed that Lawrence had never examined the employment contract that created my unusual relationship with TechBridge, and that his cost optimization had been executed without legal review of intellectual property implications. I thanked Lawrence for his time, gathered the few personal items from my office, and departed the TechBridge facility at 11:04 a.m., driving across Cleveland in deliberate silence while calculating the timeline for when Lawrence would discover what his cost-cutting decision had actually accomplished. My employment at TechBridge Solutions had begun in February 2009, when the company was still called Bridge Technologies and consisted of 23 employees developing industrial automation software for manufacturing facilities across the Midwest. The founder and CEO, Richard Torres, had recruited me from a larger competitor specifically because he recognized that his company's growth required developing proprietary technology rather than relying on licensed solutions from vendors. Richard understood that building sustainable competitive advantage meant creating intellectual property that couldn't be easily replicated, and he needed someone with both technical expertise and innovation mindset to lead that development. Miller's background in automation systems and his track record of patent development make him exactly the technical leader we need, Richard had explained during my hiring announcement to the small team. We're bringing him on to build the R&D capability that will transform Bridge Technologies from a services company into a product company with proprietary technology advantages. The employment contract Richard and I negotiated had reflected my concern about intellectual property ownership and his company's limited resources for acquiring patents outright. The structure we agreed upon was unusual but mutually beneficial. I would retain personal ownership of any patents I developed while employed at Bridge Technologies, but the company would receive exclusive licensing rights to commercialize the technology as long as I remained employed at director level or higher. This arrangement protected my intellectual property while allowing the company to build products without the capital investment required to purchase patents outright. This IP structure gives you protection while ensuring Bridge Technologies can build sustainable business on your innovations. The attorney I had consulted during contract negotiation had explained. The company gets exclusive license to commercialize your work, but if they terminate your employment or demote you from director level, the license terminates and they lose rights to use the technology you developed. It's essentially golden handcuffs. They benefit from your innovations, but must maintain your senior position to keep access. The first major technology I developed at Bridge Technologies was an adaptive control algorithm that optimized industrial equipment performance by analyzing operational patterns and automatically adjusting parameters to maximize efficiency while minimizing energy consumption. The algorithm was sophisticated enough that it worked across different equipment types and manufacturing processes, making it broadly applicable across the industrial automation market. I filed the patent application in November 2010, and it was granted in March 2012 under my personal name with exclusive licensing to Bridge Technologies per my employment contract. Grant's adaptive control technology is generating significant client interest, Richard had noted during a 2012 company meeting. We're seeing demand from manufacturers who want to improve efficiency without replacing existing equipment. This technology could become our flagship product line if we develop it properly. The revenue from products built on the adaptive control patent had grown from $340,000 in the first year to $4.8 million annually by 2015 as Bridge Technologies expanded its client base and refined the commercial applications. The success validated Richard's investment in R&D and my decision to join a smaller company where I could lead innovation directly rather than being a mid-level engineer at a large corporation. The second major technology I developed was a predictive maintenance system that analyzed equipment sensor data to forecast component failures before they occurred, enabling manufacturers to schedule repairs proactively rather than experiencing unexpected downtime. The predictive algorithms combined machine learning techniques with domain-specific engineering knowledge about how industrial equipment degrades over time. I filed the patent application in April 2014, and it was granted in August 2016, again under my personal ownership with exclusive TechBridge licensing. The predictive maintenance technology became even more commercially successful than the adaptive control system because it addressed a universal manufacturing challenge: unexpected equipment failures that disrupted production schedules and created emergency maintenance costs. By 2018, products built on the predictive maintenance patent were generating $7.2 million annually, and Bridge Technologies had been renamed TechBridge Solutions to reflect its transformation from regional automation services provider to technology products company with proprietary intellectual property. The third major technology I developed was an integrated optimization platform that combined the adaptive control and predictive maintenance capabilities with additional analytics and reporting features that manufacturing operations managers needed to make informed decisions about equipment performance, maintenance scheduling, and production efficiency. The platform patent, filed in September 2017 and granted in January 2020, covered the specific integration architecture and user interface approaches that made the combined technologies more valuable than the individual components. By 2024, products built on all three patents were generating approximately $18 million in combined annual revenue, representing roughly 60% of TechBridge Solutions' total income. The company had grown to 127 employees, expanded operations across 8 states, and established reputation as a leading provider of industrial automation optimization solutions. Richard Torres had retired in 2022, selling the company to a private equity firm called Summit Growth Partners, who installed new executive leadership focused on professionalizing operations and optimizing cost structures to improve financial performance before their planned exit through acquisition or IPO. Lawrence Hampton joined TechBridge Solutions as CFO in March 2024, hired by Summit Growth Partners to implement financial discipline and identify cost reduction opportunities that would improve EBITDA margins ahead of their exit strategy. Lawrence brought credentials from previous CFO roles at technology companies, an MBA from a respected program, and a reputation for aggressive cost management that had impressed the private equity investors. His actual understanding of intellectual property structures, patent licensing, or the technical foundations of TechBridge's revenue was apparently limited to reviewing financial statements that showed R&D expenses without explaining what those expenses actually purchased. Hampton's financial expertise will strengthen TechBridge's operational efficiency and position us for accelerated growth, Summit Growth Partners announced during Lawrence's introduction. The appointment had concerned some of the technical staff who remembered Richard Torres's emphasis on innovation investment. But the private equity owners made clear that their priority was financial optimization rather than technology development, and Lawrence's mandate reflected those priorities. Lawrence spent his first 8 months analyzing TechBridge's cost structure with particular focus on what he characterized as excessive personnel expenses relative to revenue generation. His analysis identified the R&D department as carrying disproportionately high salary costs, and my $195,000 compensation as the specific optimization opportunity that would generate the most significant cost savings. His spreadsheet comparison showing that 5 recent engineering graduates could be hired for my salary appeared compelling to someone who viewed R&D as generic technical work, rather than understanding that specific innovations and the patents protecting them were what actually enabled TechBridge's revenue. The R&D department structure reflects legacy decisions from the founder era that aren't aligned with current best practices, Lawrence had explained during an executive team meeting 6 weeks before my termination. We're maintaining senior positions with compensation that could fund multiple junior roles, which limits our ability to scale technical capabilities efficiently. Modern R&D operations distribute innovation across larger teams rather than concentrating it in expensive, individual contributors. The characterization of my role as expensive individual contributor revealed Lawrence's complete misunderstanding of intellectual property economics and patent licensing structures. I wasn't simply an employee performing R&D work. I was the patent holder whose personal intellectual property enabled 60% of company revenue through licensing agreements contingent on my continued employment. But Lawrence apparently never reviewed employment contracts or patent documentation because his analysis focused exclusively on salary expenses and headcount optimization. The termination Lawrence executed on Thursday morning had been preceded by his recruitment of 5 recent engineering graduates from local universities, all hired at $38,000 annual salary and scheduled to start the following Monday. Lawrence had apparently presented this as decisive cost management to the Summit Growth Partners investors, and he seemed genuinely satisfied that replacing my $195,000 position with 5 junior engineers for $190,000 combined would demonstrate his financial optimization capabilities while improving technical capacity through fresh perspectives. What Lawrence's analysis never considered was that the 5 junior engineers, regardless of their talent and enthusiasm, would have no legal authority to use the patented technology I had developed because the exclusive licensing agreements terminated automatically when my employment ended. The adaptive control algorithms, the predictive maintenance systems, and the integrated optimization platform that generated $18 million annually were all covered by patents registered in my name, and TechBridge's right to commercialize them existed only through employment contingent licensing that Lawrence had just revoked by terminating my position. I drove home after my 11:04 a.m. departure from TechBridge and spent the rest of Thursday morning reading in my backyard, deliberately keeping my phone powered on but placed face down on the patio table so I could see incoming calls without feeling pressure to answer them. The timeline I anticipated suggested the crisis would begin around lunch when someone in HR or legal reviewed my termination paperwork and recognized the patent licensing provisions that made my employment termination strategically catastrophic rather than simple cost optimization. My wife Rebecca arrived home from her teaching job at 3:47 p.m. and found me still reading on the patio, remarkably calm for someone who had just been terminated after 16 years. "Grant, what are you doing home? Aren't you supposed to be at work?" I explained that Lawrence had terminated my employment that morning as part of cost optimization initiatives, and that I was waiting for him to discover what my employment contract actually covered beyond salary and benefits. Lawrence believes he saved $195,000 by replacing me with 5 junior engineers. He's about to learn that he actually eliminated $18 million in revenue and exposed the company to patent infringement liability, because the technologies generating that revenue are covered by patents I personally hold and only licensed to TechBridge while I remained employed. Rebecca's expression shifted from concern to comprehension. "Lawrence fired you without checking the patent agreements? After 16 years of you building their core technology?" The question captured the essential absurdity of Lawrence's cost optimization. Lawrence analyzed salary expenses without reviewing employment contracts or intellectual property documentation. He reduced 16 years of patent development to expensive senior position and assumed 5 recent graduates could replicate what I do without understanding that what I do includes holding the patents that make TechBridge's products legally sellable. My phone, face down on the patio table, began displaying incoming calls at 1:47 p.m., according to the timestamp I later reviewed. The first call came from Jennifer Walsh, TechBridge's head of legal, suggesting that HR's review of my termination paperwork had indeed revealed the intellectual property implications that Lawrence never investigated. I let the call go to voicemail. Jennifer called again at 1:53 p.m., then at 2:04 p.m., each attempt going unanswered, as I continued reading while Rebecca prepared afternoon coffee. At 2:18 p.m., Lawrence himself called for the first time, his number appearing on my phone screen with an urgency that suggested he had been informed about the patent licensing crisis. I let it ring through to voicemail without answering. Lawrence called again at 2:31 p.m., then 2:44 p.m., then 3:02 p.m., the frequency increasing as his understanding of the situation's severity apparently deepened. By the time Rebecca arrived home at 3:47 p.m., my phone showed 23 missed calls from various TechBridge numbers: legal, HR, Lawrence's direct line, the CEO's office, and several board members whose numbers I recognized from previous corporate communications. "Are you going to answer any of these calls?" Rebecca asked while reviewing the growing list of missed attempts on my phone screen. I explained that answering would only enable Lawrence to pressure me into providing emergency solutions without addressing the fundamental disrespect his termination represented. Lawrence made a calculated business decision that my expertise was worth less than 5 junior engineers. He executed that decision without performing basic due diligence on employment contracts or patent holdings. Now he wants me to fix the consequences of his cost optimization, but I have no obligation to assist someone who valued my 16 years of innovation at exactly $0 beyond immediate salary savings. The disciplined approach to remaining unavailable required resisting natural professional instinct to help resolve crises, particularly when those crises affected colleagues who weren't responsible for Lawrence's decisions. But answering Lawrence's increasingly desperate calls would teach him that he could disrespect expertise through careless terminations while still accessing that expertise during emergencies, which would validate rather than challenge his cost-cutting methodology. Friday morning brought continued silence from my end and escalating panic from TechBridge based on the call frequency visible on my phone. By Friday afternoon, the missed call count had reached 38 attempts, with Lawrence's direct number accounting for roughly half of them. The voicemails that accumulated told the story of Lawrence's educational process about intellectual property economics and patent licensing structures. "Grant, this is Jennifer Walsh from Legal. We need to discuss the patent licensing provisions in your employment contract urgently. Please call me as soon as possible at this number." Ooh. The 1:47 p.m. Thursday message had been professionally composed but carried underlying tension. "Grant, Lawrence Hampton. We need to talk about your departure timeline and some contractual details that weren't fully addressed this morning. Please call me back immediately." The 2:18 p.m. Thursday message revealed Lawrence's dawning recognition that his cost optimization had complications. "Grant, this is Marcus Webb calling from the CEO's office. We have urgent matters regarding technology licensing that require your immediate attention. Please contact me directly at this number, regardless of the hour." The 4:37 p.m. Thursday message indicated executive-level awareness of the crisis. "Grant, Lawrence again. Look, there may have been some miscommunication about the termination process this morning. We need to discuss the transition plan and technology documentation. This is extremely urgent. Please call me back tonight." The 7:23 p.m. Thursday message showed Lawrence's attempt to reframe his termination as miscommunication. By Friday afternoon, the voicemails had progressed from professional requests to barely controlled desperation. "Grant, we have major clients threatening contract cancellation because of licensing issues with your patents. We need your help resolving this immediately. Please, call me back. We can discuss whatever terms you need." No, the 2:41 p.m. Friday message revealed Lawrence's recognition that his cost optimization had created existential business crisis. I spent Friday afternoon researching patent licensing rates in the industrial automation sector and consulting with the intellectual property attorney who had helped structure my original employment contract 16 years earlier. "Grant, this is an extremely strong negotiating position," the attorney explained. "TechBridge has been using your patented technology commercially for years and generated millions in revenue. Now, they've terminated the employment agreement that licensed them to use that technology. Technically, every product they've sold since your termination Thursday represents unlicensed use of your intellectual property. That's patent infringement with potentially massive liability." The legal analysis confirmed what I had understood when Lawrence terminated me without reviewing the patent agreements. TechBridge's entire product line, built on my 3 core patents, had become legally unsellable the moment my employment ended, and any continued use of the technology exposed them to infringement damages that could include not just lost licensing fees, but punitive damages for willful infringement if they continued using the technology after being notified that the license had terminated. "What's your goal here?" the attorney asked. "Do you want to negotiate a new licensing agreement or pursue infringement damages, or potentially even shut down their use of the technology entirely?" I thought carefully about the options available. "I want them to pay fair market value for the technology they've been using, compensate me appropriately for the termination, and ensure Lawrence faces consequences for making strategic decisions without basic due diligence. But I don't want to destroy TechBridge entirely. There are good people there who weren't responsible for Lawrence's incompetence." The attorney outlined negotiation strategy that would accomplish those goals. Let them panic for a few more days. Make them calculate exactly how much revenue they're losing and how much legal exposure they're facing. Then negotiate a buyout structure that gives you immediate payment for past use, ongoing licensing fees if you allow continued use, and whatever separation terms address the wrongful termination. Meanwhile, I'll prepare documentation showing that your patents could easily be licensed to TechBridge's competitors, which gives you leverage if they refuse reasonable terms. Monday morning arrived with me still maintaining communication silence while TechBridge apparently suspended operations on product lines built on my patented technology. According to LinkedIn messages I received from former colleagues, the company had informed major clients Friday afternoon that there were temporary licensing issues affecting product availability, and that deliveries scheduled for the following week would be delayed pending resolution of intellectual property matters. The carefully vague language suggested that TechBridge's legal counsel had advised against admitting to clients that the company was now using patents without valid licenses because the CFO had fired the patent holder without reading the employment contract. "Grant, the entire R&D department is basically shut down," messaged Michael Torres, one of the senior engineers who reported to me. "Lawrence called an emergency meeting Friday and told us we can't work on any products using certain core technologies until legal issues are resolved. Everyone knows you got fired Thursday, and now we're being told we can't use the platforms you developed. What the hell happened?" I responded to Michael with carefully neutral explanation. "Lawrence terminated my employment Thursday as part of cost optimization. The technologies I developed are covered by patents I personally hold, which were licensed to TechBridge through my employment contract. When the employment ended, the license terminated. That's not my decision. That's how the contract was structured when I was hired 16 years ago." Michael's response came within minutes. "So Lawrence fired you without realizing you owned the patents? Holy shit, Grant." He basically shut down 60% of our revenue because he didn't read your contract. The assessment was accurate, and it was apparently becoming common knowledge within TechBridge as employees recognized that the licensing issues causing product suspensions were directly connected to my Thursday termination. The corporate rumor mill was efficiently connecting the dots between Lawrence's cost optimization and the catastrophic business consequences, and Lawrence's reputation was collapsing as staff realized the CFO had eliminated the company's core revenue through careless termination of the R&D director. Tuesday morning brought the call I had been anticipating. At 9:47 a.m., Marcus Webb from the CEO's office reached me via text message rather than voice call, apparently recognizing that my 3 days of silence indicated I was not responding to standard contact attempts. "Grant, I need to speak with you today about resolving the current situation. I'm authorized to discuss whatever terms are necessary. Please call me at your earliest convenience. This is extremely urgent for the company's survival." Agree. The acknowledgement that company survival was at stake suggested TechBridge's leadership had calculated the full scope of Lawrence's error. I waited until 2:30 p.m. Tuesday afternoon before calling Marcus back, timing selected to ensure he had spent the morning anxiously wondering whether I would respond at all. "Grant, thank you for calling back," Marcus began with obvious relief. "We need to discuss resolution of the licensing situation that resulted from Thursday's events. The company recognizes that your termination was executed without adequate review of employment contract provisions, and we want to negotiate terms that address both the immediate licensing issues and appropriate compensation for the premature termination." The carefully diplomatic language acknowledged TechBridge's position without explicitly admitting that Lawrence had committed catastrophic error. I responded with equally measured approach. "Marcus, I'm willing to discuss licensing terms for the patented technology, but I want to be clear about the situation. TechBridge terminated my employment Thursday morning, which automatically terminated the exclusive license you held to commercialize my patents. Any use of those technologies since Thursday afternoon represents unlicensed use of my intellectual property. Before we discuss future licensing, we need to address the past use and the circumstances of the termination." Marcus was silent for several seconds, apparently consulting with legal counsel, who was likely listening to the call. "Grant, what terms would you consider reasonable for resolving both past use and future licensing?" I outlined the structure my attorney and I had developed. TechBridge has generated approximately $18 million annually using my patented technology. For the past use under the employment-based license that existed until Thursday, I'm willing to accept a one-time payment of $2. $5 million as fair compensation for my contribution to that revenue. For future licensing, if TechBridge wants to continue using the technology, I'm proposing $400,000 annually with a 5-year minimum commitment. And for the wrongful termination circumstances, I'm requesting $500,000 severance that reflects the inappropriate manner in which my employment was ended. The total demand, $2. $5 million immediate payment, $2 million in licensing fees over 5 years, and $500,000 severance represented $5 million that Lawrence's $195,000 cost savings had transformed into expensive lesson about reading employment contracts before terminating patent holders. Marcus's response suggested he had been authorized to negotiate substantial terms. "Grant, let me discuss these terms with our board and investors. Can you give us until Thursday morning to respond formally? And in the interim, can you agree not to license the technology to any of TechBridge's competitors while we're negotiating?" The request for exclusivity during negotiation was reasonable, but I attached conditions. "Marcus, I'll agree to negotiation exclusivity through Friday morning, not Thursday. And I want acknowledgement that Lawrence's termination decision was made without appropriate due diligence. on intellectual property implications. I'm not interested in simply extracting money. I want recognition that the cost optimization approach that eliminated my position represented dangerous incompetence in strategic decision-making. Marcus agreed to both conditions, and we ended the call with plans to reconvene Thursday morning with formal response to my proposed terms. I spent Tuesday and Wednesday consulting with my attorney and also reaching out to several TechBridge competitors to gauge their interest in licensing my patents if negotiations failed. The market interest was immediate and substantial. 3 competing industrial automation companies indicated they would be interested in licensing agreements that would give them access to technology currently exclusive to TechBridge, with proposed terms that exceeded my TechBridge demands. Grant, if TechBridge won't meet your terms, you can easily license these patents elsewhere for more money, my attorney noted Wednesday afternoon. You're actually being generous by offering them continued exclusive access. They just need to recognize that access requires appropriate compensation and respect for the intellectual property you created. Thursday morning at 9 a.m., Marcus Webb called with TechBridge's response. Grant, the board has approved your proposed terms with one modification. They're offering $3 million immediate payment instead of $2.5 million. And they want to extend the licensing agreement to 10 years instead of 5 years at the same $400,000 annual rate. The total package would be $3 million immediate payment, $4 million over 10 years in licensing, and $500,000 severance. They're also agreeing to your condition about acknowledging the due diligence failure. The improved offer totaling $7.5 million represented TechBridge's recognition that losing exclusive access to my patents would be catastrophically expensive, potentially destroying the company's competitive position in the industrial automation market. I accepted the modified terms with one additional condition: that Lawrence Hampton's role in the crisis be explicitly documented in board records and that consequences be imposed for his failure to review employment contracts before making strategic termination decisions. Grant, I can tell you confidentially that Lawrence's employment is being terminated effective tomorrow, Marcus replied. The board determined that his failure to perform basic due diligence before eliminating the R&D director resulted in catastrophic business impact that demonstrates incompetence incompatible with CFO responsibilities. His termination will be characterized publicly as pursuing other opportunities, but internally it's being treated as termination for cause due to the crisis he created. The confirmation that Lawrence would face professional consequences for his cost optimization disaster provided the accountability I wanted beyond financial compensation. I agreed to the final terms, and TechBridge's attorneys prepared the licensing agreement and separation documents that would formalize our new relationship. I would no longer be an employee, but I would be a well-compensated patent licensor whose intellectual property enabled TechBridge's continued operations. The $3 million immediate payment arrived in my account via wire transfer on Friday afternoon, accompanied by the fully executed licensing agreement, separation terms, and a letter from TechBridge's board acknowledging that my termination had been executed without adequate review of intellectual property provisions and with insufficient consideration of the strategic importance of key patents held by Dr. Miller. The carefully worded admission avoided legal liability while providing the recognition I had demanded. Lawrence Hampton's termination was announced internally at TechBridge the following Monday, with the standard corporate language about pursuing new opportunities and mutual agreement to transition. But the true story spread quickly through Cleveland's technology community as employees shared accounts of how the CFO had fired the R&D director without checking patent agreements and nearly bankrupted the company through $195,000 in cost savings that eliminated $18 million in revenue and created $7.5 million in settlement costs. "Did you hear about Lawrence Hampton at TechBridge?" became common conversation opener at technology industry events over the following months. He fired their R&D director to save $195,000 and didn't realize the guy owned all the patents on their core products. The licensing terminated automatically when he got fired, and the company nearly went bankrupt before negotiating a $7.5 million settlement. Lawrence's CFO career is basically over. Nobody wants to hire someone who eliminates revenue by firing patent holders without reading their contracts. Standing in my new office 6 months after Lawrence's memorable cost optimization, I reflected on how his reduction of 16 years of innovation to expensive senior position had transformed my career from TechBridge employee to independent patent licensor with multiple revenue streams and complete control over my intellectual property. The $3 million immediate payment had funded establishment of Miller Innovation Technologies, my own R&D consultancy that was developing new industrial automation patents I could license across the industry rather than exclusively to one company. Your TechBridge settlement gave you the capital to build exactly what you always wanted: independence and control over your innovations, my attorney observed during our 6-month review meeting. Lawrence accidentally did you a favor by forcing the employment termination that let you renegotiate from a position of strength rather than continuing under the original employment-based licensing structure. The professional satisfaction came not from Lawrence's termination or TechBridge's expensive settlement, but from validation that intellectual property carefully protected through smart contract negotiation could transform careless cost optimization into career advancement and financial independence. Lawrence's view of my $195,000 salary as excessive cost had revealed his fundamental misunderstanding of how value is created in technology companies, and his termination by the board had prevented him from causing similar damage through future optimization initiatives that ignored intellectual property economics. The 5 recent engineering graduates that Lawrence had hired to replace me were talented and enthusiastic, but they faced the impossible task of innovating within a technology framework they couldn't legally modify because the core patents were held by someone no longer employed by the company. Several of them reached out to me for consulting assistance, which I provided at appropriate rates, while mentoring them toward understanding that building sustainable technology careers required protecting intellectual property rights rather than assuming employment automatically transferred ownership. Lawrence's mistake was assuming that paying your salary gave TechBridge ownership of everything you created, I explained during a mentoring session with one of the junior engineers. Smart innovators structure agreements that protect their intellectual property while allowing companies to benefit from it. The employment-based licensing I negotiated was unusual, but it ensured I retained control over my innovations while giving TechBridge exclusive access as long as they valued my contribution appropriately. The experience had proven that experienced innovators who understand intellectual property economics can structure relationships that protect their interests, even when employers make decisions that prioritize short-term cost savings over strategic value preservation. Lawrence's cost optimization had been built on the faulty assumption that eliminating my salary eliminated only my labor, without recognizing that my employment was the legal foundation for TechBridge's access to patents, generating most of their revenue. Have you ever been called too expensive by someone who reduced your expertise to salary numbers without understanding what your employment contract actually provided? Innovation leadership sometimes requires protecting intellectual property through careful contract negotiation, so that people who view you as cost rather than value discover exactly how expensive their optimization becomes when they lose access to what you created. If this story of intellectual property protection, employment contract structures, and the consequences of cost optimization without due diligence resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button to Revenge Tales with Luke. Share your experiences with being undervalued, protecting your innovations, and teaching lessons to executives who reduce expertise to expense categories without understanding what drives revenue. See you in our next story.